Today we're going to showcase Magisters Terrace. This is one of the new dungeons coming in midnight. Also, it is going to be one of the Mythic Plus dungeons in Season 1, so understanding this dungeon is probably on any Mythic Plus players like to-do list. Obviously, it's still alpha, so a lot of things can change, but today I want to walk through the dungeon and kind of break down some of the mobs, the design of the dungeon, some bosses, etc. Now, this is a kind of redesign of the OG TBC dungeon, except right off the bat, they kind of trick you here. So instead of taking your like normal path by running through here, you can see like I was thinking that we go through this door, and I didn't realize that you actually go off to the right into kind of like the secret little corridor that Mr. Umbric opens up for us. So you're going to start off with one mob that you're going to have to wait for RP. I'm not a huge fan of that, if I'm being honest. Like, the idea that you're going to have to start a dungeon and not be able to utilize Lust immediately, and it's going to feel weird sitting in your cooldowns, is kind of mid. Throughout this first hallway, though, you're going to see just a handful of, like, your average Mythic Plus mobs. Some melee men and a couple of casters who are going to cast bolts and polymorphs. Polymorphs can be dispelled if they happen to go off on a player, but if not, you're just going to kick bolts and everything's going to be kind of chill. I believe some of these guys have a tank buster that applies an aura to them that causes their attacks to deal additional arcane damage. So that's going to be obviously an issue that we're going to, like, we could see an issue there with scaling. Magic damage on tanks is not necessarily the best. Anyways, once you clear that first hallway, you're going to come down into this library where you have these patrolling librarians who will stun you if you walk into their circle. And there's these dormant books laying on the ground. If any player gets close to these books, they're going to activate, they're going to pull. They don't do anything. They really just like melee the tank. But you're going to see this red book on the ground right here that if you click on it, it's actually going to give your entire group a 10% haste buff for 30 minutes. It's actually in the form of a debuff. So I believe I spent some time not in this run looking around trying to see if there's other books that give stats. I couldn't see any. It would be really cool if you got to like pick what book you read. Like, let's say there's a haste, a crit, a verse book, and you got to kind of like choose which buff you want. That'd be kind of tight, but I couldn't find any, so it's just like 10% flat haste. You're going to want to pick up that book. Anyways, the idea of this library is you need to progress to the next area of the dungeon. So there's not necessarily a set path, even though there's probably like the most efficient route in here. But the map wasn't being super great, but there's this mini boss here, this like blazing pyromancer. Typical shit pyromancers do. They cast ignition, which puts out I believe an aura, like a dot on the entire group, and then flame strike will target the tank, putting a circle underneath that player. So you definitely want to not drop it in the path of the next area, but it's all good. Then you kick pyroblast, of course. I kept opening the map because this is my first time in here. I didn't really know where I was going. Umbric once again comes to our aid, opens up this like library, and then we are on like in this next area of the dungeon, which has these same mobs we've already seen kind of in the first hallway. A bunch of casters and some of these like mana worms and some of these like spellbreaker mobs that just again do like a bit of tank damage through their additional arcane damage through their melee hits. There's also these devout healers that I don't think cast a heal, at least from what I can tell. They actually end up putting shields, like it's like a disc priest, I guess, on their allies. So there's that polymorph cast. We're going to just kick it so no one gets polyed. And we want to progress through this next little corridor. So this area of the dungeon is going to be relatively familiar to players who played in TBC. I was not one of those players. I am too young, you old fucks. But this area, I guess, is like one of the OG boss rooms, kind of. Outside of the fact that there's like a boss blocking us. Actually, I think the area that I'm talking about is after this boss, but you're going to clear these guardians. Now you're probably going to need the entire room to work with. So pulling these worms on either side it's probably going to be your best bets. They don't do much from what I can tell outside of like apply this. I don't even know what this debuff does that's on me, but I'm going to end up pulling this boss off to the side here. So this is the first boss of the dungeon. Obviously there's potential to pull a lot of trash onto this boss, which could be good. You have a lot of worms around the room. You have some like other casters and melee mobs as well, like the spell breakers and stuff. This boss does a tank knockback, and then I believe he does a group knockback and leaves a pool on the ground. And then he does like an intermission phase where he starts sucking in these orbs. So it's called this refueling protocol. I'd imagine it's when he's out of energy. My first instinct was to like soak, and it looks like that is the case. You want to prevent these orbs from hitting the boss. Every orb that connects with the boss will cause him to take or deal 10% more damage, which obviously is problematic in an infinitely scaling system. I don't know if it's if it's an instant wipe basically once one of these orbs hit in a higher key level, or if it's just like kind of intended. I'm not really sure, but pretty simple first boss. I don't know what the mythic mechanic is, if I'm being totally honest. And I accidentally pulled trash on the boss, so it ends up being good. So yeah, that's the first boss. Anyways, we're going to continue down pulling some more Spellbreakers and these just like Blood Elf mobs. Now, these Rune Spellbreakers do a Runic Wound, and this gets applied to a couple of players, dealing like damage over time. And then they do this Arcane Shield targeting a random player, which will prevent all attacks from the front of them. So it's your standard move behind them. Kind of annoying for casters. It'd be better if it was baited on the tank, but that's all right. It's just, maybe that's something that they'll end up adding. So kind of same thing here. We have our Spellbreakers and some melee mobs. There's nothing really to these pulls. You can definitely do a lot of this trash probably in one pull, if I'm being honest. So like at the start of the dungeon, you could probably do the entire hallway. Here, you can probably do the entire hallway. You can just run to the next boss room and like line of sight everything around the corner or something like that. You're going to see these mobs just replicated over and over and over again. Now this might change. My only concern with these packs is that there seems to be a couple of casters here. God, I hate these nameplates so much now that I'm watching this back. That's terrible. And Threat's obviously super fun right now. I'm playing Master of Harmony. I think by the time this pulls over, I end up swapping to Shadowpan because I think I got frustrated with Threat in here. The last pull is a single healer and 2 of these Spellbreakers. So I'm going to end up swapping to Shadowpan before the boss because I was not having it. So this boss is pretty chill. Seranel Sunlash is the boss. So he applies a runic mark similar to the mobs before to random players. Now these players will have a permanent circle on them that deals damage, so you need to stay spread out. Then he'll do this suppression zone. And then during the suppression zone, players walk into the circle to drop their runic brands. Now when doing that, it does, I believe it does a small burst of damage and it spawns pools underneath players. So you kind of want to like stagger soak, drop them. Trying to watch. Yeah, it looks like it does a little bit of AoE damage. So you're kind of just like staggering your drops. And that's pretty much it. Again, I didn't look up the mythic mechanic, so I can't really talk about that. But pretty chill fight. You just have this circular room to work with. I don't know if there's going to be like an optimal place to tank the boss to drop the suppression zone. I don't know if dropping it in the middle is better. I don't know if dropping it near the edge is better. It really depends, I think, on the group composition. I think it might be better for melee to drop it near the edge of the room, but who knows? Okay, so this dungeon is like oddly linear. So you get to this is the end of the dungeon, except now we're going to fight our way in reverse. So once the boss goes down, you have to run up here. I don't know if I want them to remove this or not, but you run up here and you have to channel this like thing of Twilight, this little Cynosure? Whatever. I don't fucking know, dude. English is so hard. And then we leave. Basically, now the Void is attacking, and we have to, yeah, kill some Void bad guys. So a lot of these mobs are, like, I don't really know. Some of them are casters, some of them just melee or tank. It's not a difficult set of mobs. You got some small guys, you got some big guys, and we are now trying to get back to the third boss room, which is the room right when we came out of the library. I don't think there's any like contingency on spawning the boss before getting to the boss's room. But once we get to the boss's room, there's going to be some stuff to do. So when you get to the boss's room, there's a bunch of big men channeling into these like void rifts or void portals. I think you need to clear the entire room, from my understanding, which you're going to want to do anyways. The boss room is you're going to need some room to play with. So here comes the boss. It's these like 5 little jelly men, and they're going to make one big jelly man, and this is the boss. So the boss throughout the encounter is going to split into numerous jellyfish who are going to have like a mechanic to deal with. So he's going to start off by putting a circle around a player. I believe when it expires, it drops a pool, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, no, we're good. Maybe on Mythic it does. I don't know. He's going to then spawn 2 little jellyfish, and these mobs are going to have like static locations. They're going to fly to certain areas of the room, and then they're going to rotate around. And then they're going to do this Astral Grasp, which is going to target 2 different players and start sucking those players towards their like void circle. You're going to obviously want to avoid standing in that. And then they're just going to kind of float around the room. Now, these mobs share health. So the boss and the jellyfish that he spawned all have a similar health pool. So like multi-target cleaving is going to be really good. And then keeping the boss on top of them is also going to help the boss go down quicker because you have 2 target plus cleave. Now, this is some trash that I pulled. This isn't part of the boss fight. These are just some mobs that I didn't clear beforehand. But as you saw, he spawned 2 more jellyfish. So now that means there are, including the boss, there are 5 jellyfish. So everyone's going to get pulled in a certain direction. And so obviously, probably not super melee friendly. But the benefit is you can kind of go towards your own jellyfish that you're getting sucked towards, and you can just melee that one and you're still doing effective boss damage. So from immediate reaction, I think players aren't going to be a fan of this fight. The room design is kind of awkward. Obviously getting pulled a bunch isn't like super fun. But I think over time, I think players might actually end up enjoying this fight because you're gonna be able to do so much damage, especially if you're like a Boomkin or a Shadow Priest or like an Affliction Warlock or something. Anyways, this boss goes down, and now we are gonna progress to the top of the Spire. So there's a bunch of just like void guys. These stairwells or stairways or rampways, whatever you want to call this, are not. I don't like fighting in here. This is generally pretty terrible, just because of like your camera. I'd much rather prefer being in like something like Grimmail Depot than having these like super tight corridors. Now, there are mobs in here that are channeling these portals. I don't know if you need to clear them or not. I think in here we ended up pulling them, but I did this again in a follower dungeon, which unfortunately the recording was a little corrupt, so I can't even show you. I ended up skipping them and it ended up being fine. So I think unless you need the percent, you probably don't need to pull them. They're not really in the way. They're not blocking anything. You can just like walk up the side to the left and go up the ramp. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you have to clear a certain number of portals to spawn the boss, and I just like ended up pulling more later. But as you can see, we're just like walking around this pack and it's not a big deal, just pulling the voidlings up the stairs. And then once you get to the like this outside area, you can go left or right. It kind of depends on what you want to pull. I think there's different mobs on either side, but you can go either way. I think it will depend on group, but I don't have like a full understanding about what's actually dangerous in here, because on normal, you can send in all the swirls, you can let casts go off, and like you're never really in peril. So I don't know. It's gonna come down to Mythic Plus testing. Once probably beta comes out, I don't think they're not planning on doing Mythic Plus testing during alpha. And then we need to clear this ramp. The one thing that's annoying to me is that they do this consuming strike, these like Void Lord dudes, which applies, like, look at that healing absorb. It's like my entire health bar. That could get out of control pretty quickly. Obviously, having like a big expel harm could be good, or obviously your healer doing big damn, but this consuming strike just like, it's more than my entire health bar of healing absorb, which just seems bad. And last but not least, we are heading up to the very top of the Spire, which we are going to find the final boss, Degentrius. Degen guy? Yeah. So this guy is pretty goofy. The whole premise of this fight is that he's gonna split the room up with like he's like a volleyball boss basically. So his tank buster does this, it's Umbral Eruption, which is this giant circle underneath the tank. The best place, you probably want to like move into his hitbox and try to stay as close as possible. But as you can see, this like void line popped up, and then there's this soak mechanic. Whenever someone soaks, it's gonna bounce to a new player. And so I'm going to move in it because obviously it was in the tank buster. So I'm going to knock it to someone else who needs to soak this. And then it's going to bounce to the other side of the room. Now, I'd imagine, I don't know the mythic mechanic, but I'd imagine that it's like you're going to get a debuff after soaking or something along those lines. I'd also imagine that there's going to be 4 beams instead of the 2 beams splitting up the room, which would also make the mythic mechanic like kind of nonsensical because you're already going to be split up anyways. But yeah, pretty chill fight. So it's just tank buster. You want to kind of stay away from your melee DPS or from your DPS who are going to be soaking. And yeah, that's it. And yeah, so running into the line stuns you for a bit and knocks you back. So I just wanted to test that there. And yeah, that's pretty much the entire dungeon. And yeah, that's it. Magisters Terrace, it's definitely a throwback to, you know, the OG days of TBC. It's definitely Silver Moony vibes. Personally, there's a little bit of RP in here that I'm not a fan of. So not only are you starting the dungeon off really slow by having to kill one mob and then waiting for RP, you have the library minigame, which is not the easiest thing to navigate for how tall and tight the bookshelves can be. Some of the, like, your camera can clip in weird ways. It's pretty easy to get stunned. The stun is like 6 seconds long. There's just issues with it. Once you kill the second boss, there's also this long waiting period where you have to like channel into this random spire. Then there's the RP of all the mobs running down. So like that's a little annoying. The boss design, at least on normal, so far feels okay. This isn't my favorite dungeon so far. I think something like Den of Nalarok and Mayasara Caverns seem a lot more interesting to me, both from boss design to zone design to flexibility within pathing the dungeon or routing the dungeon, where this dungeon is just like super linear, which isn't a bad thing. It's definitely a drawback for players who like having more adaptive routes to whatever the comp might be or pushing the highest IO. I'm excited to see this in testing, but hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know if you have any questions, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace.